Welcome to Carefree and Conscious, paranormal and profound authors with stunning true stories. If you like this type of content, be sure to subscribe. I'm your host, Susanne Wilson, the Carefree Medium and Intuition Educator. Today on Carefree and Conscious, Secrets of the Spirit Orbs with the Orb Whisperer, Virginia Hummel. Have you ever taken a photo and found an orb, but you weren't sure if it was an orb or something else? Virginia Hummel is utilizing spiritually transformative experiences to create transformation from grief into balance and joy. With the physical death of her youngest son, Christopher, she began experiencing many amazing communications from Chris. Her deepest hope is that through the studying and perhaps photographing orbs, you will come to a greater understanding of who you are and your importance here on Earth. Among Virginia's books are Cracking the Grief Code, Orbs and the Afterlife, and Miracle Messenger, Signs from Above, Love from Beyond. And now, Carefree and Conscious, Secrets of the Spirit Orbs. Virginia Hummel, welcome to Carefree and Conscious.
Gosh, thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to be here and talk about this orb topic today.
Well, I can't tell you how meaningful this is to a lot of the students that I've had in classes. I'm excited about seeing you again because I met you a long time ago at the conference. I actually found you through Anne and Herb Puryear, and we were on our Afterlife Research and Education Institute board. We were talking about who can we get that's really knows orbs. And so if you ever hear anything from Anne Puryear, since she's transitioned, if she shows up in a picture, let me know. Let's talk about how you became the Orb Whisperer, which others have nicknamed you over many years now. You started having spiritually transformative experiences early in life.
I think the one that stands out the most is standing in my driveway about somewhere between ages 8 and 10, maybe. And I was out there by myself, and I just suddenly asked, how did I get to be me? And I pinched my skin, my arm, and I knew I was here, but how did I get to be me? Why didn't I come back as my mother, my brother, or my dog? Now, my family's not spiritual. They don't talk about any of this. Where would that lofty thought for a little kid come from? I have no idea. I knew I wasn't from here. I knew I'd been given a set of instructions and I couldn't remember what they were. So that's really my first big memory of something outside of myself. And from there, it just kind of fast forwarded. I try to go to bed every night, and they would visit me, and I would surround myself with 100 stuffed animals and make a tent and try to hide because they were coming. I didn't know who they were. And I still don't know who they were. It could have been family, that had crossed over or something. But yes, I've had just all through my life, I've had many different types of experiences. But it really wasn't until my son died that was the catalyst to discover more.
Now, your son is Christopher, and it's my understanding that Christopher, from the world of spirit, really likes to kind of play around with signs, like particularly a hummingbird. But before we get to that, there's a history of spiritually transformative experiences, or we call them STEs, around his transitioning to the spirit world.
I knew the moment I held him at birth, I just had this horrible feeling that he was going to cross before I did. And I knew in metaphysics, what you think about, you attract. I didn't want to think about that, but he was always getting hurt and different things were happening. And that feeling kept coming back to me. And I tried to push that away. And when he was about 15, he came to me and said, "Mom, I know when and how I'm going to die." And I'm like, "How?" And he said, "Mom, I don't want to tell you. I don't want you to be upset." So I pushed him, and a few years later, he said, I'm going to die when I'm 52. Well, he died when he's 25. And after his crossing, I remembered our conversation, and those numbers rearranged themselves 52 to 25. Also, the night that he passed, I'd gotten in bed early. I'm a workaholic, and I just wanted to relax. And I was laying there, and I suddenly had this thought, here I am relaxing, and my son is laying dead in a ditch somewhere. And I'm like, wait a minute, stop. Where did that come from? Well, not a few hours later, about 2 a.m, he was in a horrible motorcycle accident, and I saw the pictures, and he was laying in a ditch. There was, just him. There was no blood or anything. He had his motorcycle stuff on, but the grief and the shock that you get when they call you and tell you that was overwhelming. But there was also this nagging feeling of, why am I, how did I know that? Why did I know that beforehand? Why did I feel that he would pass before I did? So that was really one of the biggest catalysts that sent me on this journey to discover more. And in that process, I found that a lot of parents have had the same premonitions, or their children have come to tell them, Mom, I'm going to die at a certain age. I won't be here. And it was just fascinating to find out I was not the only one who had experienced that type of STE.
And it seems to come with its share of guilt, that knowing ahead of time. And the guilt, it's not necessarily rational to feel guilty that you couldn't stop a physical transition, is it?
Yes, there is some guilt. You definitely have a reflection on your life of, what could I have done differently? I could have made these different choices, and I went back and forth. I still do. Had I turned left when I turned right, would the outcome have been different? But I realized in this whole process, he died in 2006, so it's been 18 years, that he and I had a soul contract. And this was part of that list. And also on that list was how I was going to handle it. Was I going to be a victim or a victor? Was I going to step into grace, or was I going to let grief control my life?
It's amazing. Stepping into grace rather than staying in that moment of turmoil where you're thinking, was this information that he is going to pass given to me so I could do something? I've been hearing this for years, working with bereaved parents. And what I have learned in all this time is that, no, your soul had a knowing, a precognition of something that was in alignment with the soul's plan of yourself, your child, your whole family. And I've actually had the children come in and say, look, Mom, there was nothing you could do. I was going. I just had this the other day, a young man saying, Mom, I was going, and I'm at home. You're the ones that are away. I'm at home. How do you make that move from acceptance that we'll be together again, but we're apart now? How did you make that move into getting all these signs that you're renowned for getting from Christopher? What was the catalyst there? Was it your choice, your free will? Was it just, is he super special? I mean, all kids are super special, but what do you think the dynamic is? People really want to know how you got all those signs, and tell us about them.
I think it's because as a mom, you have your kid radar. Suddenly when they're into something, you just know it, and you go check on them. Well, when Chris passed, I put up my mom's spiritual radar. I put it out there. I knew his consciousness survived. I knew he was there, yet I was a mom in grief. And make no mistake, I didn't just go from being sad to being totally fine and joyful and have all these experiences. It was like a full-on washing machine agitator, back and forth and back and forth. One minute I'm on the floor wailing, and then I would find myself say, stop, get up, put on your spiritual radar, reach out. He's going to contact you. And when he contacted me, when the lights would blink or something would happen along those lines, I felt joy, and I felt this vibration of energy rushing through me. And the more I felt that, the more I was able to experience the connection with Chris. I realized that his consciousness vibrates very high, and as a human, we're on a denser level. And in order to meet, he would have to lower his vibration. I have to raise mine. So grief is a very heavy, heavy, dense feeling and vibration. So it's very hard being in that state of grief and sadness and depression to make that connection with spirit. But I had to physically go through the grief. Your neural pathways realign themselves. All sorts of things happen. But in those moments when I had clarity and felt I want to reach out to him and I would get a connection, I would feel this joy and this peace come over me. And I'm like, wait a minute, I like that feeling compared to this heavy feeling of deep grief and sadness. Yes, I grieved. Yes, I felt joy. It was literally a back and forth motion. And then the more experiences I had, the higher I felt, the more I wanted to share that. It was very difficult because the majority of people grieve traditionally, and it's just this overwhelming sadness, and you have to walk through it, and there's really nothing else. But I told my family, there is something else. Look at all these things around us that are happening that tell me every day Chris lives on.
You made a conscious decision. I'm going to change this energy to make it easier to get contact. Is that correct?
Yes. And I also made a conscious decision. This is my grief journey. I can make it look like anything I want. And I would rather grieve joyously and have that excitement and the contact, because with the contact, my son was still with me, as opposed to being in such deep depression and sadness that I couldn't make that contact. Well, one thing I did know when I got the phone call from my brother that morning, there were two things I knew for absolute certain. I knew he was home and I knew he was safe, and I exhaled. I had been holding my breath for 25 years, knowing that this moment was coming, and I didn't know when. And I just exhaled and knew in my deepest part of my soul, he's home and he's safe. And that's what I wanted to really impart to other parents who were going through this. But it's difficult. Everybody has their own way of grieving, and we just need to honor that. I just wanted to show people with my Cracking the Grief Code book that there's so much more to this grief journey that we haven't been told and we haven't been taught. So
yeah, Cracking the Grief Code. I think a tagline for that could be something you just said a minute ago: grieving joyously and getting signs and communication. Tell us about the phone calls from your son on the other side and the hummingbirds.
Well, as far as the phone calls, the weekend that he passed, his best friend, Mandy Patterson, was receiving these phone calls from an all-zero phone number. And she would answer it. She'd say hello, and nobody was on the phone, but she could feel somebody was there. And this happened several times. In fact, she ended up calling, I think, Verizon to say, who is this number? I think somebody's stalking me. And they said, we don't have an all-zero phone number. And I know there was one where, oh gosh, my mind is blank, but Chris did call me, and I just knew he was there. On the phone, I could just feel it, but I didn't have any voice with that. I don't remember. I'm telling you, there's been so much in 20 years that sometimes you just have to compartmentalize stuff. And I just can't remember, but definitely our loved ones, it's that it's torsion. It's the torsion waves. The Russians invented or discovered torsion. And it's how thought interacts with this subtle energy. And it also interacts with this electromagnetic energy. And I think that's how the consciousness from the other side can use our phones, can use our TVs, can use our iPads. It just doesn't really matter. I remember being asleep one night, and suddenly I'm wide awake and I felt someone in the room. And it was in the days where you had the flip phone. So you had to flip it open, push the button, and then it would light up. And suddenly my phone just lit up on its own. And I knew Chris was standing in the room. It was, it's just one of those things you just know. It's like when you have children and your back is turned, you know which kid walks into the room. You just know their energetic footprint. So a lot of people do have these electronic messages, sometimes even text messages, or they leave them on the answering machine.
Yeah, and those are fun to get, but I tell you, my mind's blown with the hummingbird and all of the antics of the hummingbird. And I have no words. I love the signs, the symbols, synchronicities, the dream visits, all of it.
Mm-hmm.
It's a beautiful little bird, like a hummingbird. It just melts your heart.
So after Chris crossed, I was having these interactions with hummingbirds. I lived down in Palm Desert, California, and they were everywhere. We had bougainvillea and all sorts of plants, and I just saw them every morning. It was wonderful. And after he'd passed, I'd put his bunch of his stuff in my garage, and it was about a month after he'd gone. And I went out in the garage and opened the garage door and started going through his things. And man, it just hit me hard. I started crying. I was halfway in the garage. Suddenly, this little hummingbird darts in the garage and hovers about 3 feet right in front of me, just staring at me, flapping his little wings. And suddenly, I'm looking at this little bird. I'm overcome by the beauty and the grace of God's little creature. And I felt my mood shift from this heavy sadness to this gratitude and wonder at this beautiful little creature. And the moment that my energy shifted to this lightness and joy, off it went. I'm like, okay, wow, that was really powerful. So then I ended up moving houses. And as I was waiting for the moving truck, I was in the master bedroom of this new house I was in. And there was a large living room area. And I'd opened the sliding door maybe 12 inches. And I was in the master bedroom and I heard this. And I'm like, what is that noise? Oh my goodness. So I walk out into this open living room with no furniture, and a little hummingbird had flown in through the door and was flying around the room. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, how am I going to get him out? I don't have a broom or a net, nothing. So he kind of found himself up against the window, flying against the window, trying to get out. And suddenly I am compelled to walk towards where he was. There were these 3 giant picture windows. I mean, literally compelled. It wasn't my own thought. So I walk over there, and I'm probably a good 8 or 10 feet away from the window. Suddenly I'm compelled to raise my hand up like this, all the way above my head, and close my eyes. And this little hummingbird lit on my fingers, my index finger and my middle finger. And I'm like, oh my gosh, the bird just landed on my finger. And I brought it down to look at it. And just his little feet, his little claws were like the size of like daddy long legs, I was just noticing everything, the iridescent green coat and his little eyes. And oh my gosh, he was precious. Suddenly the energy in the room shifted, and I could feel like I feel Chris is here with me right now. It just shifted again.
It did as you're talking.
Oh my, I've got goosebumps everywhere.
Yes.
He was everywhere. He was around me. He was underneath my feet. He was inside me and through me. And it was the most incredible feeling. And then as that moved away, I still had this little bird on my finger. And I'm like, oh my gosh, how am I going to go across the room, out the door? This little bird's not going to stay there. But yet it did. So I just kind of slipped across the room, and I had to slip out the sliding door with my hand and my body sideways. I get out to the patio, and it's still on my fingers. I'm like, well, this is incredible. And I'm going, gosh, thank you so much for coming. It's amazing. And he was just, if he could have whistled, he would have been going la da da da, looking around. He was waiting for me to get something. And I just, it was like just this precious little moment. I was speechless. I literally was speechless. I said, I'm okay. You can go now. And he nodded his head, and
the bird
nodded his head and flew off. And I basically stepped backwards, kind of collapsed backwards into the window, going, what just happened? I called my two daughters who love all that stuff. My other family was like, are you nuts? That hummingbirds don't do that, right? It was so powerful, that moment. But I kept wondering why Chris was appearing as a hummingbird, why this was happening. Turns out, we found out his snowboard had a big hummingbird on it. So that for him was an important feature. Now, there was one other time that, oh my gosh, I'll have to come back to that one. It's gone
It's
out
a
of my
lot.
mind.
Well, I think also you're reacting to the energy around you, because I can, we're doing this. Most people are listening. We're
Mhm.
doing this on Zoom, and it gets posted to YouTube as well. And I can see
Oh,
and I can feel that, Virginia, when you made that shift in your energy, you're talking about that shift um, from grieving to
gratitude, really, and
yeah,
grace.
that's what it is. And joy. He came in, I got chills down both of my arms, and it's summertime in Arizona. It's 78 degrees Fahrenheit in here. It is not chilly. And then you said he's here. So you're reacting to the energy around you right now. One thing I heard is, how you'll have to do it again, but you made the noise with your throat, with the little fluttering noise
Yeah,
of the hummingbird. I heard him do that just now.
yeah. I love it. I love that.
That is so cool. So he's around you all the time. How do you, okay, I'm sitting here covered in chills. It's really awesome. I think, and you probably know this, but isn't Chris working with you from the other side? I mean, this is not just all for fun. He knows where he is. He is he with a nod to Bill and Judy Guggenheim. He is giving the
Mhm.
hellos from heaven, but he knows he's good, and you feel him around. Why do you think he helped make you into a researcher and a teacher about orbs? What does that bring to humanity?
I think it's not just about the orbs and the researching. I think it was trying to find proof that we don't die. We actually live on. Our consciousness lives on for infinity. And it's the love that we take with us. And through the whole process of him dying and the STEs and all the orbs and the people I've met, there's just so much more to life than we're told. It's like we're kept in the dark for some reason. And I realized I probably had raised my hand on the other side, said, sure, I'll take that on. Okay, Chris, you're going to die, and I'm going to go through all of this. He literally came through, helped me in meeting people. In writing my Orb book, it was fascinating because I would get to a part in a chapter and I needed a specific picture and I didn't have it. And I would just look up and say, I need this specific picture. The next morning, without fail, in my inbox from across the world would be the exact picture I needed for that moment. Or some family emergency would happen. I would have to stop writing. I'd be gone for a couple of weeks. I'd come back. And in that interim, I received the exact story or photo that needed to go in that exact spot. And there was a reason why I was stopped to not write anymore. And it went on and on. And there was actually, I don't know who it was. I don't believe it was Chris, but when I started writing, I would hear this kind of a almost like a knock, but it was a crack. Like, how your house settles and sometimes it cracks?
Yeah.
It was a very specific crack. And I knew there was an energy, a consciousness, something was there that was really guiding me to do this, because there were far too many moments where I needed something and it showed up in the inbox the next day, or the people I met, or having the photo I took of Wayne Dyer end up in his book, and all the synchronicities to actually get to that moment where my friend was the one that came up with the Orb Whisperer. I would never in a million years say,
I
okay, I'm going to be the Orb Whisperer, right? But she
know.
forced me to go to a conference. And 48 hours before we left for the conference, Spirit is telling me, you need a business card. Not only that, you need a website. And I said, wait a minute, I don't know how to do all this stuff. 30 hours of the 48, I ended up building a website, doing the cards, handing them out. Just one synchronistic event after another just flowed right down the road. It was incredible. And all the while, I had that high vibrational feeling like you're swimming in champagne. You know, when you're sitting at the end of a runway and the getting ready for takeoff, and the pilot pushes the engine forward and it revs up before he gets off the brake, before it shoots. That's the feeling I had constantly. And the synchronistic things that would happen, the STEs, the contact with my son, it was incredible. And that's really what I wanted to get across to parents who've lost their children, that there is a whole nother experience waiting for you if you just take that one step, that, you know, that scary step forward, that you too would be able to experience that.
Oh, that is an amazing testimonial. How did you end up meeting or pioneering Orb researchers and documentarians, Heinemann and Ledwith?
I met them, interestingly enough, 20 months after my son died. I had got up to turn the air conditioning off in the middle of the night, and I came back into my room, and there was a bright ball of light the size of a ping pong ball. And I looked at it, and it looked at me, and it was shocked that it could see me. And I was shocked I was looking at this. And it darted across the wall. It took a sharp left, and then it disappeared, and it left a trail of light like a sparkler. And my first thought is, oh my gosh, there's a burglar outside with a flashlight, and I'm running through my house, checking my alarm. When I finally calmed down, I realized I black out curtains and there's no possible way. I laid there awake for quite some time thinking about it. Talked to a girlfriend the next day. She said, oh, that's a light being, an orb. I'm like, what's that? I don't know what that is. She said, it can be a sentient being, your consciousness, a past loved one. She said, by the way, the International Orb and Light Being Conference is being held in Palm Springs in 2 weeks. I said, you're got to be kidding me. They have a conference devoted to this. So anyway, I went to that conference and they were there and I got to meet them. And then I ended up contacting Michal Ledwith and Klaus to get permission to quote in my Orb book, and chatted with them a little bit. They did some wonderful research. Really, they were the first on the scene to let us know what this was all about. And with my experiences, I thought there was so much more to cover. And I'm very grateful that Spirit and Chris allowed me to have this information to share with all of you.
No, it's just like with materialist science, the work keeps being built upon by the next person and the next person after that. And the more that we know, the more that we can grow and teach others. So let's get into the teaching about the orbs. I have more often than I'd like to admit, people sending me pictures and saying, is this an orb? Is that an orb? And I see a lot of lens flare and bugs and dust and things like that. And I've noticed that most of the time, not every single time, but most of the time, if it's really an orb, it has certain characteristics to it. And there's something that happens in me physically as a medium that I can't ignore. It's something from the heart chakra, some tingling or pressure, or from the solar plexus, or like the chills I got down my arms when you felt your son here a while ago. How do you recommend that people discern what's an orb versus something else?
The first thing is to really get to know your camera or your iPhone and play around with it. Shoot pictures into the sun, into light sources, do a flash in the mirror, because it's going to show you what your camera is capable as far as the lens flare and the oddities, the bokeh that come up. And that's what I've done with all of my cameras, so that I know. I took one shot and Cookie Monster was in it from my backyard. And I knew Cookie Monster is not my backyard, but it was the way the sun was coming through my camera that created that. It can create cones and balls and all sorts of things. And that's the most important thing, is for you to get to know whatever piece of equipment that you're using, what it's capable of creating that is not an orb. Now, if you even shooting in the dark, but there's a landscape light or a street light, the aperture will close more slowly in the dark because it needs more light. But if you move it, you can actually make squiggles and, things that look like writing. And I have a beautiful picture in the Orb book that looks like there's angels at this funeral. But what it was is it was taken in the dark, and the person had accidentally moved their camera when they depressed the shutter. And so I went outside in my own backyard at night with the landscape lights and recreated that photo. So I think the more you do it, the more you can realize and understand what is and what isn't an orb. If you're shooting just in the complete blackness, there's nothing to reflect back at you, then you'll probably start seeing the real orbs coming through. The Ring cameras and our security stuff, they catch a lot of things, but there's also, you'll find a spider web will have, looks like little orbs in a row on them, and they move in the wind back and forth. And people are like, look at the orbs, but it's not, it's really a spider web. So it's just becoming aware of what is and what isn't. I talk about a lot that in my book, and have quite a few pictures of what is and what isn't.
I think it's good that more people are recognizing that orbs exist, that the spirit world can appear to us that way. But that doesn't necessarily mean that's what they look like, that that's their consistency in their whatever dimension they're in, whether we want to call it heaven, the afterlife, Valhalla, Summerland, astral plane, whatever it is. They're not really a floating ball of light, but we can perceive them that way. Is that important for us to know about different colors of orbs? Or you've seen some with gold, you've seen them in different colors, some actually have faces and things like that. Is there some key code there between how they appear that tells us some interesting information?
Well, Michael Newton, some people are familiar with Dr. Michael Newton with Journey of the Souls and Destiny of Souls, and how he did the past life, the lives in between live regressions. And many of his subjects would talk about the fact that they were specific colors, and they were in groups with specific colors. And I found that to be really interesting, because I would shoot pictures of red, green, orange, yellow, pink, purple, blue, gold, multicolored orbs, wondering why do they come in colors? And once I read his work, I understood that these are souls of it's just a hierarchy of your education that you get down here as you vibrationally increase. I've always thought the reason why Jesus was here was to show us unconditional love and non-judgment. And in order to get there, we continue to reincarnate on the planet to experience everything, the good and the bad. You're the perpetrator, you're the victim, to understand and evolve that there is nothing but unconditional love and non-judgment as we go through these things and move up. So as I see these orbs of different colors, I can now understand that they are on their own journey of moving towards this complete unconditional love and non-judgment that our master teacher Jesus had shown us, by his presence here, of what is possible. And it does take, I think, thousands of reincarnations to eventually, I don't even know if we can ever get to that spot, but I would like to try.
Yeah, that's what we're doing. Some people call it ascension. And it's just an increase in our vibration rate, so that we're in a frequency where our thoughts, words, and actions are in alignment with compassion and love for self and others, respect. Everything that you've talked about so far just tells me it's about love. You get into that zone of the love and the appreciation, you start to realize that you're still with the spirit world, and your people who were in physical are still with you. Why would they want to show up in pictures as lights?
I think it's just a visual way for them to communicate with us. Children, infants, see them all the time. My granddaughter would say bubble or ball. I have so many stories of little kids talking about the dots. Grown-ups, many grown-ups can see them. I've seen several. I don't see them all the time. I actually feel when they move in. That's how I knew when to pick up my camera to get the shots of the orbs, because I could feel a whole group come in, and they would come in like a school of fish and such. But I've actually taken pictures with people that have, purple or blue orbs around them, master teachers, ascended masters type of energy. There is a book by Helen Greaves. Oh my gosh, it's in my Orb book, and I've forgotten the title of it. That's horrible of me. But she talks about, she was very good friends with a nun who was a nun for many, many years. And then she crossed over and she had total communication with her. And she said that while you're on the other side, there are these planes of vibration that are so intense that coming from a human plane, you just can't, you're unable to be in that vibration. But she said the snowballs, the light, the dirty gray looking orbs, those are the youngest ones. And that she would, on the other side, recognize people by their vibrational energy and the colors that would surround them.
Wow. That's somebody that gets me as a kid, seeing auras around people and animals and plants. And to me, it's an extension of the aura. But it's accessible to everybody. And then you have this method of actually taking a baseline photo and then inviting the orbs in. Can anybody do that? Let's say you've gotten to know your camera, you've experimented with it in different settings. You're going to take these photos in low light. Can you then just go to your location and say, okay, wait, guys, I'm taking a baseline photo and I'll let you know when to come in and say cheese. How does it work?
Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. I've found places where I'm just not getting any activity and other places where I was getting a lot. So I thought I had to go outside in my house in Palm Springs to get the photos. And then I got like, it's kind of cold out here. I don't want to do it. Maybe would they come inside? So once I was inside, I'm like, okay, everybody come in. And yes, I could get them to come in. And there were hundreds of them that just would come in at a certain time, and like a school of fish come in and out. So yes, you can ask for them to come in. I would caution everybody to make sure that what they're calling in is of the highest love and divine light, and only accept nothing else. I actually just put up a mental shield around me that I will accept nothing but that which is from our divine creator, period.
I could hug you right now. It's too bad we're on Zoom. There was this school of thought, Virginia, of, wow, if you're protecting yourself every morning, it's like you're living in fear. I'm like, no, if you protect yourself in the morning, then you just forget about it the rest of the day. You're just being prudent. I mean, if you have a burglar alarm in your house, you turn it on when you go to sleep or when you're away. If you have a lock on your front door, except for a few places in the world, you're going to lock your door when you're home. Why wouldn't you put a metaphysical burglar alarm on your own energy around you? So I think that's really, really smart. Do you think it helps to ask for and let this be not only those who are from the white light and have my best interest at heart, but does it also work to say, and let them be my people?
That I couldn't say one way or another. When you say my people, like relatives that have crossed over, or
I get this question a lot when people say, how do I know who the orb is? And I counsel, look, I really do feel like you've got an orb there, but I don't want to overstep and interpret that photo for you. It's sacred to you. What else was happening at the time that you got that photo? Oh, well, I had just heard their favorite song that just popped up on Alexa. And I'm like, that's compelling. So that would probably be that person. It seems like there's something concurrent with that, or a feeling, or like you said, you just felt your son was there. You just knew he was there.
You are absolutely correct in that. And I think I'm glad you don't step up and say, oh yeah, that's a loved one. A lot of people want that validation, but it's not our place to tell that. It's for that person to feel and to know who it is. I know I've had many different people around me that I'll certainly know when I'm on the other side, but not always my son. My son I was closest to, so I recognized his energy. In fact, just a few days after he crossed over, I was sitting at my desk paying bills, and it was at the time where you could have on your computer screen how pictures would flash through just arbitrarily. They would, from your Photoshop book thing, and a picture of him came and it stuck on there. I didn't touch it. I didn't touch the mouse or anything. It just stuck. It was him. And suddenly it felt as if someone had a warm blanket from the dryer and wrapped it around my shoulders. Then I felt from my top of my crown chakra here, this warm, as if someone poured this warm liquid and it just swirled through me like this. And this peace came over me. And I knew my son was hugging me and had kissed the top of my head. It was just incredible. Now, could someone have told me, yeah, that's your son? I knew, I just knew, I recognized his energy. The same thing in photos. Again, you were absolutely right to say, oh, hey, if Alexa was on in the song, the probability is pretty high that that's that person that you lost. And people want that validation. They're hurting. And I think it's really important for people like you and me to walk with caution and to encourage them, but not, I don't know. I find that I can't say one way or another. I need to let them make that decision. My aunt died in 2015 and we had a family dinner. And while they were standing up and speaking, and then a second aunt died that day of her memorial service. So as my cousin's speaking about them both, I take a picture and there's two big orbs there. So for me, Aunt Susan, Aunt Carol, it was really obvious. So then my cousin comes up and said, do you think you can get a picture of Aunt Susan next to me? I said, okay, well, let's try. I take a picture. I show it to her. There's this little orb by her shoulder and she starts to cry. She said, I didn't tell you this, but I asked Aunt Susan to show up as an orb by my shoulder. So I didn't have to say it. She looked at that, she knew, and it was instant because we asked it to be there. I had her caregiver and my sister-in-law sitting on the fireplace area. And I said, okay, Aunt Susan, jump in the picture. I take a picture of both of the women sitting there. It's a big orb right next to her. My interpretation of that was Aunt Susan that just popped right into the picture there. So I just want to tell your listeners and followers and people that really love the orb phenomenon that I think you really have to tune in intuitively. And if you ask for a specific person to show up, you can pretty much assume that that's who that is.
That's awesome. That's really cool. I think I'm going to put up a picture too from, I don't remember if it was 2016 or 2017 at an AREI conference. You'd already given your presentation. There was a panel. I'm always on George Norrie's panels wherever I go.
Mm-hmm.
And I was sitting next to another medium and there's this huge blue orb covering both of our heads. Now, nobody else on that panel is a medium. But the two mediums sitting together have this huge orb over their heads. When you were at that event or you go out someplace like that, you're getting all these orb pictures. Other people didn't necessarily get pictures of orbs or took 100 pictures and maybe got one thing that could have been.
Mm-hmm.
Are you a medium?
I'm the Orb Whisperer. Come on. No.
Orbwhisperer.com.
Could I be
Do you consider yourself a medium? Do you a medium, the person in the middle, is it more about you or is it more about the spirit people? Is there something about you? I mean, you talked about gratitude and you've cultivated things in yourself that anyone can cultivate in themselves through grief. Do you think you were also born like this was part of that mission?
I think God gives everybody gifts. He does, and they're not all the same gifts. And I can't say for sure if I'm a medium. I know I'm an empath. I've been able to bring in white light and pull a visual tent over someone across the world and feel in my body what's happening in them. Same thing with a friend whose mom had had surgery and didn't quite wake up, and they didn't know if she was living or dying and what was happening. So I pulled this light over this person, and I slipped into this velvety blackness that was so peaceful and so loving that the gal who was with us, my teacher, asked us to do this and then come back out. I couldn't get back out. I had to have them help pull me out of this. I don't know what to call that. I think any one of us can be open to these gifts that God gives us, open to spirit. And I think where your focus goes, your focus grows. For someone to say, "Can you read me?" I don't know. I can feel when somebody comes into the room. I can feel that energy.
Okay, that's a beautiful viewpoint. Kind of getting at the same thing, but is your camera an objective instrument in capturing orbs, or is it you with your camera? Could
I would
somebody,
say it's me.
okay,
It's
okay.
me.
So there's something about you. So if I handed you my cell phone and we went out in dim light, it's about you. It's not about the camera. It's not about my cell phone or anybody's cell phone, right? Or do you have
I'm
to
going
pick
to say
up?
yes and no. I'm going to go back to
This is
the
very interesting.
torsion wave, these thought waves.
Yeah.
Have you ever been thinking of someone and the phone rings and it's them?
Yeah.
Because your thoughts are real. They're vibrational waves that you put out there. So for me, thinking and being obsessed with this orb phenomenon and wanting to see these and inviting them in, they're like, "Oh, hey, she's right on the right wavelength and she wants us. Let's go for it." And I think you can grow. I know you can grow that. You can grow that ability. It's like you as a medium, you have that ability to a much larger ability than I have. That's where you've focused your attention and you've worked on specifically growing that gift. And I think we all have that ability to connect with other people. You think about someone you haven't seen in 30 years and you run into them. Where does that come from, right? And I think it's the same thing with consciousness. We're all consciousness. We're all connected. I'm just going to say, we're all children of God, of that beautiful, loving, non-judgmental energy. We're all pieces of it, having these experiences down here. And our thought waves, we're all connected. That's why do unto your neighbors you'd want them to do unto you. We are our neighbor. And a lot of people don't really understand that. So in growing, in using your thoughts and your intention, what you think about, you bring about. So I'm going to say for anybody, if you wanted to take orb pictures, what you think about, you bring about.
Oh,
That
that's
makes
so,
sense?
it makes tons and tons of sense to me. And also, how about this? Don't get disappointed if it's not working right away.
There have been times when I go out and I can't get them. And I realize that there's just something off with this spot. And I try another spot. And I know that there were sweet spots in my house. This house that I'm living in now, for some reason, I just was told to shut it all down and not do any orb pictures in the house. I don't know why, but I have taken zero in the almost 5 years I've lived here in this particular house.
Oh my gosh, I
Dedicated.
can't believe you said that. You're not going to believe this. I had the same thing, that house I lived in for about a dozen years in Carefree, Arizona. I would always see indigenous peoples in the backyard in spirit form. And they got used to the fact that I could see them.
Mhm.
And they would be doing something in the yard or walking together or sitting together in a circle. And I had two little dogs that when they were out there, the dogs would just stand at the door and go, "I'm not going out there right now. There's spirit people." And so I had these two really spiritual, really well-known spiritual teachers over with a group for dinner at my house. And I thought, man, this is when we're going to get some orb pictures. Nothing. We stood out there, we invited them. I said, "My friends that are always here, We want to take your picture and show us your lights. Absolutely nothing. And something inside of me just said, they don't want this. Don't ever try that again. And that was it. So there really are places then, from what you just said, that nobody wants you taking pictures and looking for orbs. And there are other places where it's just like you said, a school of fish swimming through in orbs.
I just knew I was dedicating this particular house to God. I just did. I'm not a religious person, but in this particular time in our lifetimes, at this moment, we are in such a spiritual war that we have to choose sides. There's no, you have to pick a side. And this is where I took my stand. And even the name of my toilet is church. The guys that would work on my house, one guy's name was Moses. I'm not joking. Another one came in with John 3:16 tattooed on. Everything that the last owners of the house, their last name was Abba, which is Father. I mean, synchron. And I said, God, this is your house. You work through me, do whatever I need to do. But he told me I needed to shut down the orb picture taking here. And I ended up working on another book. Do you know John Audette from Eternia? He was very good friends with Bill Guggenheim.
I don't know him personally, but I know of his work.
I ended up working on a book with him called Love by the Light. He's had 7 different angel encounters that saved his life. Absolutely incredible. So that's kind of, that's where my energy has been flowing, to really help people understand that we all need a relationship with our creator immediately in this day and age. But
Yes.
doesn't mean that I can't take orb pictures, but my focus has been in a whole different direction because of the fact we're in the end times of revelation right now that we're walking through. And it's been, when spirit says do this or do that, you just have to listen and go with it.
The world is shifting so fast, and not necessarily in the way we want it to. We have to be that change.
We do have to be that change and bringing in that light. And that's what I loved about the orbs, that they were the light. I kept, Jesus said, we're the light of the world. And we are that light. That orb is inside of us, that beautiful little colored orb or white orb or whatever it is. It's just right there. And I have a fun, interesting experience that happened one night. I was sound asleep, living in my Palm Desert house where I took all the orb photos. And suddenly spirit decides to wake me up and tell me at 2:00 in the morning to go outside and take orb photos. I'm like, no, I'm not going to. It's cold. I'm tired. No. 15 minutes I argued with this energy compelling me to do this. So I go outside and I take 20 or 30 photos, and I'm just kind of cranky, and I come back in and I'm going through and I'm deleting it. And suddenly I see something like, what in the world is that? It was the most original, unique picture I've ever seen of an orb, including all the ones with the faces. It looked like the Starship Enterprise, basically. There was a red orb with a full plasma field around it, coming up from behind my jacuzzi and then coming straight on. And I had never seen anything like that in my entire career of taking orb photos. It's actually in my book, but I guess I'm telling you that because spirit can definitely compel us to do things. And I think it's really important that we're on the right side of spirit, especially in this day and age. That
you see where it leads you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Wow, you have led us to think outside of what we're used to, and to open our eyes and be aware of that. These orbs, these spiritual lights, you just said they're inside of us too. It's not that we get reduced by physical death into just a light, but that we're always light. Is that about right?
We're always the light, and our job is really to be bringers of light, and to every word, thought, and action is bringing that light. And the more light we can bring into our world right now, we have that ability to shift what is happening. And I think that's probably the most important thing I've said in our whole interview today. we have that ability to make the change. And it's through that light. It's bringing in light. It's our connection with God, our relationship with Him, and having that love and that God energy coming through us in every word, thought, and action, every moment of every day. And it ripples, it literally ripples out everything that we do. And so it's really important that we make it the bright and the light and the love.
I'm speechless, so I'm just going to say,
It's okay.
go to orbwhisperer.com, look at the pictures, read the book, and enjoy expanding your own light. Virginia Hummel, thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Visit our website, carefreemedium.com, or find us on social media at Carefree Medium. Thanks for supporting Carefree and Conscious.